So Dear Hannah is a follow-up standalone novel to Baby Teeth. And in it, Hannah is a 24-year-old. She is a functioning sociopath. And the story really is like a deep dive into her attempt at living a normal domestic life. But a number of the solutions that she finds for family problems are, shall we say, deeply problematic.
Well, one thing about Dear Hannah, when I was preparing for this and thinking of like reflecting on reading the book and making my notes and everything, it's one of those books where I feel like I can't talk a lot about what happens because for fear of spoiling things, but that then made me craft questions or comments about the book that were much more about why something happens or the psychology of something or the, societal analog to the thing we're talking about. So it almost forced me to craft hopefully more interesting questions because I don't want to spoil the story. So, you said you haven't really had an opportunity to talk about Dear Hannah yet, but that was kind of like where my brain started is like, how do we talk about this? So, that's an interesting starting point, I think, is like, I feel like this book, a lot of the stuff that could be spoiled is just a lot of the book, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it makes complete sense to me. I know what you're talking about.
So, and that kind of pushes the conversation in a specific direction. But before we go to that, on the record as part of the podcast, I want to congratulate you on your new cat that you have in your household, who has joined us for this recording. For anybody who's watching on the YouTube,
that's Fergus.
Fergus looks like a very sweet cat.
Yes, he is.
I one time many years ago, I was recording with someone who had a cat that was either, I don't remember if it was fearful of or aggressive toward like voices coming through machines. So like if there was like a toy that said something when you touched a button or something, the cat would freak out. And so when we were recording this podcast with them, he had to like take the cat out of the room and like it was like scratching at the door and stuff. So it's nice, hopefully, that, well, you got headphones in, but
no, he's chill.
Nice and chill.
One of my very shy, scared cat is terrified of human voices. So it's like there have been a couple of times where he was like asleep on my lap, and then I have like a video call, and he's like, but no, the door is closed. He can't come in. And he's the chillest cat in the world, so he's fine.
There's something so great about a chill cat. Very much so. So yeah, congratulations for your expanding family.
Thank you.
And then that's the other thing I just thought about is obviously we're connected on social media and stuff. And one of the things that I've enjoyed kind of outside of your authorial kind of presence on social media is your surrounding wildlife and seeing, I think there's like a deer family, and then there was I think you have the 3-legged groundhog, right? Is that
yes? I had the 3-legged groundhog who had 4 little babies this year, but then I had a very aggressive groundhog move in who ran off the 3-legged groundhog and her family. So yeah, there's a lot of groundhog drama going on back there right now. So we'll see.
Wow. The place that I live in right now is it's on a lake, and I thought, I'm going to see all this beautiful nature. Sometimes there's like a great blue heron that sits right at the end of right where the water is, and that's kind of nice, but it just kind of stands there, so it's kind of boring. And the only other kind of exciting thing I've seen so far is a muskrat I'll see swimming around sometimes in the lake, but it's not, I'm not a Disney princess like I was hoping I would be in this place. So.
Yeah, I've got also, for the first time, I have raccoon babies who come to see. I have like a bowl outside with water, and I put sunflower seeds out there and all of the animals like that. But this is the first year that I've actually had the raccoons coming during a time when I can see them, and they have raccoon babies. So yeah, that's it's cool. A whole little world out there, which I live in the middle of the city, by the way, but there's this little triangle of land at the back of my property, which can't be built on. And it's just big enough to support all of this wildlife, which is pretty amazing.
That's fantastic. Then I was thinking you could go like full Jeff Vandermeer and just have like little trail cameras that you post videos of from
Yeah,
sometimes.
I actually have been meaning to get an activated trail camera because I want
Yeah.
to know what animals I'm not seeing.
Right. Yeah.
I would really like to know that.
Yeah, definitely. And it's fascinating. Like you, but that's, I feel like that's a rabbit hole that you can just fall into. And then before you know it, that's kind of your whole life is watching the wildlife. So,
Yes, I can see that happening very easily.
all right. Well, so we should probably talk about Dear Hannah. One thing I'm going to bring up at the start of this conversation about Dear Hannah. First of all, I love the book, and it evolved my feelings for Hannah in ways that I didn't know how to expect. But I think it ended up being really cool, and hopefully we'll get into that a little bit. But I was looking at recently Becky Spratford, who was on with us when we talked about Mothered. So I would recommend if people wanted to go to her RA for All horror blog spot, she's got I thought it was a really what I like about the way that Becky talks about books is she tells you what to expect, and she highlights like kind of like the nice the standout things about the book. And three words three words to describe the book: squirm inducing, disturbing, and trauma. So
I would pick a different 3 words personally, but that's
yeah,
just me.
but I don't know, because that sounds compelling. That would make me want to pick up the book. So, but yeah, for me, I guess 3 words. If I was going to do 3 words, um, yeah, I just put myself on a spot for an answer that I don't have. Do you know what
I
3 words
do.
you would
Yeah.
choose?
Okay. I would do
Uh-huh.
psychopath, no, sociopath, dark humor, and lovable anti hero.
Yeah, I'm on board for that, because one of the things, like, like mine would be like, friend, scary, and um, I don't know, like you know what I'm saying? Because I want to be Hannah's friend, but there's a side to Hannah that I have to acknowledge. It's like if you wanted to hug a porcupine or something like that. Like
Right.
it's lovable and it's adorable, but like it will hurt you. And so they're
Cute,
kind of
cute from afar. Maybe
cute
keep
from
it at
afar.
arm's length.
But yeah, Becky did a nice little write up of Dear Hannah. And I definitely think that she's a good voice to pay attention to if you're looking for good books and stuff like that. So, but that being said, one of the things that she emphasized in our 2024 horror preview that we recently did, where I mentioned Dear Hannah as a book that I was very excited to read, is that she emphasized the thing that you had been talking about in your acknowledgments, and I think kind of in general, and that's that while Dear Hannah is a sequel to Baby Teeth, it's a standalone kind of sequel where it doesn't necessarily require having read Baby Teeth in order to enjoy reading Dear Hannah, which I think is a great distinction, because that kind of opens up discovery for people. It takes a workload off of them. And from reading your acknowledgments and everything, it almost sounds like that was something that came from your experience in film, like making this kind of something that isn't relying on other stuff in order to be its own story. Was I reading into that, or is that somewhat accurate?
Yeah. I mean, I consider sequels to be potentially very problematic, which is why for a long time I wasn't interested in writing a sequel to Baby Teeth. Um, in part because you know that the people who either watched the first thing or read the first thing have expectations about what the next thing is going to be.
Right.
And the next thing needs to have enough that's familiar to be satisfying, but also enough that's new so that it isn't just repetitive. And for a long time, I was convinced that was a needle I did not need to thread, and I did not want to thread. But then I sort of conceived of this idea of doing Hannah when she was a little bit older, and then I didn't have to worry as much about those particular elements. And meanwhile, I know that what some people really wanted all along was Baby Teeth 2.0. Like they just wanted me really to pick up, when Hanna is 10. And I know that's exactly what a lot of people wanted, but I was never going to write Baby Teeth 2.0. It was not of interest to me. So I feel like the best that I could do to satisfy my interest in writing a sequel and to satisfy so many requests that I've gotten for a sequel, to me, the solution was to do it with Hanna a little bit later in life.
Yeah. And I think you make a good point, because the immediate thing I think of is, if the story picked up not long after Baby Teeth, aren't you just kind of telling the same story? Like, didn't you already give us that story? So what else could there be? So that's, I think it was a wise move to put some time between the two books. Because the way that Dear Hanna plays out too, there is references to things that happened after the end of Baby Teeth, but before the beginning of Dear Hanna. So you also gave yourself fertile ground to place the plot at different points in her life too. So that was, I gotta imagine that was kind of helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to give people who had read Baby Teeth some little reminders of things, that they might have forgotten. And for people who hadn't read Baby Teeth, give them little glimpses into who Hanna had been as a child. And another reason, like, for me to do a sequel that takes place later in her life, and to have these little bits drawing back to the beginning, is, I don't know about other people, but I have a terrible memory. And if I had to read the book 2 of something that picks up right where book 1 left off, I would absolutely guaranteed not be able to remember it unless I read book 1 right before reading book 2. Mm-hmm. And I just think that for people like me who have bad memories, that's a terrible position to put readers in. So I really wanted it to be like, you could read these books in either order. And if you start with her as an adult, and then you might be intrigued to find out who she was as a kid, then you can go back and read Baby Teeth. Or for all the people who've been waiting to find out what happened to Hanna after Baby Teeth, well, here you go. You can find out.
Yeah, that's a really strong point. And I do feel like that's one of the problems of reading a series kind of contemporaneously, is so the example that comes to mind is, I'm pointing to Chuck Wendig's Miriam Black series. So it's a 6-book run of stories about this character Miriam Black, and I read them as they came out, but they came out once every year or 2 or 3 or whatever. So by the time the 6th book is out, it's been 10 years since I read the first book, and I don't remember anything about it. So the question is, do I go back and read it all, or do I just hope that he put enough in that book to trigger the memories for me or whatever? So it's a risky proposition for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
But I feel like your approach worked well. I think you did what you were trying to do, which was to create a standalone book where you could read them in either order. I think that was a success. So that being said, though, I was having a thought when you were just talking, because one of my questions is, what is it about Hanna? And I based that question on my kind of love for the character Hanna, which I kind of assumed everybody just has this love for Hanna. And then I was like, wait a minute, am I weird? Or is that the fans' reaction to Hanna? So I guess from Baby Teeth and maybe early readers of Dear Hanna, is there a fandom around Hanna, or is it a fandom around this crazy story? You know what I'm saying? Does everybody love Hanna, or is it just, am I the weird one?
Yeah, no, I think a lot of people do love Hanna. And I think that the people who have responded very well to Dear Hanna are the people who love Hanna. I know that, after Baby Teeth, people were kind of divided into 2 camps of love her or hate her. Mm-hmm. And there are definitely people who hated Hanna, who just saw her as pure evil, who saw her as something kind of simplistic, but I never saw her that way. Mm-hmm. And I feel like, there are definitely readers who really respond to her. This is the only time during a book's existence where I read the reviews that are coming in. So I've been reading them on NetGalley and on Goodreads, because I love to see what people's initial response is, and to see all of the people who are like, oh, I feel badly for her. And, like,
Yeah.
I really like her. Like the reaction you had, like, I really like her. Is there something wrong with me that I really like this character? And I love that. Like,
Yeah.
that's how I feel about her too.
Yeah. Yeah. It caused me, but I just questioned myself for a second because I guess I didn't realize maybe that's not the kind of general reaction. It's interesting to hear that it's kind of one way or the other. But and sometimes I'm going to stumble by trying to not spoil anything. But one of the things in the beginning of Dear Hannah that you did that I thought was great was, so the book starts out with a then chapter. So it's, a chapter that takes place before the timing of the majority of the book. And in the then chapter, Hannah's an adult. She's a phlebotomist, and she kind of sees an opportunity when she observes a man and his daughter who are there to have blood drawn, and the daughter is scared and everything, and she sees an opportunity to kind of put vision into play, kind of in a way, because she's got this idea that I'm trying to think of the best way to say this, like what her perfect life would be like would be to have a husband and the kid involved, and he's already had the kid and everything, and so it almost seems like she's kind of like hunting in a way, hunting the situation that she's looking for, and she finds a way to work her way into this situation which she sees as ideal. And what I thought was cool about that, I know I'm talking a lot, I'm sorry. What I thought was cool about that was it showed that she is trying to manipulate a situation to be what she wants it to be, which mirrors a lot of what was going on in the original book. But it also kind of it puts her in a place where she thinks that she can like do action A to get result B, and everything is going to be fine. And then that kind of creates a promise at the beginning that plays out when things kind of start to change throughout the book. So it was neat that we got a mirror of her trying to manipulate things to the way that she wants them at the beginning of the book, to kind of contrast it against what reality decides to do with that. So I don't even know how I'm going to ask a question about that, but I just want to say that was a great way to set it up. Like, we get to see how Hannah's changed, but we get to see how maybe she's still kind of naive about stuff too.
Right. And that her whole modus operandi from Baby Teeth and Dear Hannah is to try to manipulate the world so that it works the way she wants it to.
Yeah.
And in Baby Teeth, she's very, she's young, she's naive, she doesn't know as much about how the world works. Mm-hmm. And that was definitely one of the things that I thought about all the time when I was writing Dear Hannah was, okay, this was Hannah when she was 7. If you take those characteristics and her personality and you put them into a 24-year-old, how would those same characteristics manifest? Because I do think people are kind of fundamentally the same through their lives. They just mature and evolve. So I wanted those aspects to like still be present of who she was as a child and how she tried to manipulate things, but she didn't always understand the world quite right. And she's still kind of like that as an adult. It's like she still doesn't fully understand what the consequences are going to be of her behavior, but she feels the need to like try to control it and make it happen.
Yep. Yeah. And the thing that now that I'm thinking of it on the parallel tracks of the person who has red baby teeth and the person who has not, and they're starting out here, it works well in both ways. If you've read Baby Teeth, you're like, oh, she's up to her old stuff. I wonder how this is going to play out. And if you haven't, you're like, oh, this is a tricky thing to do. I wonder how it's going to go wrong. So like either way, if you're just being introduced to Hannah or if you've read the other book, it gives you an opportunity to understand like kind of where she's at and see like danger down the road. Anybody who's read the description of the book knows that, there are problems with her plans that, they're roadblocks and obstacles that she tries to overcome. Yeah, I think that that was a great way to set up the book and then kind of watch the stumbles and falls and stuff like that.
Yeah, it was fun. It was fun to write that. It was a little challenging to just think like, how would a 7-year-old evolve into a 24-year-old? But I liked it.
Yeah.
It was fun.
Well, and I have a couple of thoughts on that. And one of the things I observed as the book goes on is that it seems like when something isn't working the way that she wants it to, she kind of has like an iterative process. Like, this didn't work, I'm going to do it this way instead. And that's the right way to do it. And when that doesn't work, oh, I'm going to do it this way instead. So she's problem solving. She's running into an obstacle. She's finding an alternative, and she keeps going forward. And I thought that was a really interesting thing to see. Like, I guess it's an aspect of what you might call an evil or a bad person that you don't really see as like, you know, how did they overcome their failures and stuff like that. That was kind of cool.
Yeah, and honestly, for me, it was a little bit challenging because I knew I had to write her as being very manipulative, and I'm like, how does a manipulative person function? You know, it's like if you're really trying to control someone else's behavior, how do you do that?
Yeah.
And as I talked about in the acknowledgments at the end of the book, yes. So one of the things that helped inform the book and how I developed Dear Hannah was reading a book called The Sociopath Next Door, which is a nonfiction book about sociopaths in our society. And contrary to popular belief, being a sociopath does not mean that you're a serial killer or a murderer or anything else. It just means you're a person who doesn't have empathy and who doesn't have emotions the way other people do. And one of the things that was so interesting to me in the book was sort of saying that, you know, for most of us who have emotions, we live our lives based on how we feel and the emotions that we get out of our experiences. And that's what motivates us. But for somebody who doesn't have those emotions, they sort of view life more as a game where it's like, how do I get to this place? And how do I do this? And for different people, depending on the level of intelligence of the sociopath, they might be very, very high functioning. They may be politicians. They may be surgeons. They may be very successful in society. Or a sociopath could be the very annoying person at work who's always like manipulating things and driving everybody crazy. And so I really like to think of sociopaths as just like the ordinary people moving through life. Like that became very much how I wanted to explore Hannah of how does she function as an adult? You know, what is she trying to do? You know, she has some basic intellectual understanding of what is right and wrong and what is a desirable life and what isn't. But without feeling the same things that other people feel, how does that manifest in how she lives and what she does?
Right. And the interesting thing, and the thing I think that allows you to explore that in an interesting way in Dear Hannah is the existence of her stepdaughter. And so when she decides this is the life I want, you know, she kind of ingratiates herself with this man and who has the daughter, and then they start a relationship. Eventually they get married. And so she's in a relationship. She's in a marriage with someone. She has, you know, she's stepmother to this kid. So she's helping to raise a child. And so, and she seems like she's good at it. Like she seems like she fits in the family really well, and she's doing things right. And it does seem like she cares about them. Um, and so does she? I think so. Like if you were asking me, did Hannah genuinely care about her husband and her stepchild? I'd say, yeah, absolutely, she did.
I mean, she likes her husband as sort of a life partner. I don't know if I would say that she's ever been in love with him. I don't know that she would have a sense of what that means. And for her stepdaughter, I very much conceived of her character as sort of being how Hannah's father functioned in Baby Teeth, where
Oh,
he
okay.
was the object of her almost obsessive love, because she really does not know how to love normally. So I feel like in Dear Hannah that her stepdaughter is the person that she kind of loves obsessively, sort of in an unhealthy way, in a more possessive way. So that's where I tried to, like, again, have a little parallel to Baby Teeth with that element of how she thinks she loves people.
Yeah, definitely. And it's obvious that if you want to define relationships, the amount of time that's spent on her marriage versus her like motherhood, it's very strongly leaning toward her relationship with the stepdaughter for sure. So that is interesting. Yeah. That's I hadn't thought exactly of that parallel, but it makes total sense now that you're saying that. Um, but like, and then the thing that I thought was interesting was to see from Hannah's perspective the things in normal life that we have emotional kind of currency in, being more transactional. Like sex happens because not because it's like an act of love between two people. Sex happens because I want to get that feeling and boom, we're done, or whatever, like that type of thing. So um, there are definitely parts of her interaction with her family that are more, um, I want to do this thing, or I know that doing this thing leads to this result, which is what the thing I want or whatever. So yeah, you definitely have more of a transactional feeling with stuff too. So it's kind of,
Yeah.
yeah, it's an interesting way to kind of analyze her being a part of a family.
Yeah. Yeah. No, she's definitely transactional, and in part, part of why she picked the person that she picked and the family that she picked is she very much wanted to live at the same kind of social hierarchy that she had lived when she was living with her parents. It's like
Mm-hmm.
she didn't want to go and be, a young person who goes and gets a studio apartment and works to build themselves up. She just wanted to transfer from literally from her father's house to her husband's house and live at the same socioeconomic,
Yep.
standard, and have the same kinds of luxuries that she always had. That was very much a calculated decision on her part.
Mm-hmm. And bringing up her relationship or her the value of her father and Baby Teeth makes me think of how, um, I'm trying to think of the best way to state this. She knows that bond can't happen again with her father. Um, Probably on both sides. Like he changed when he realized the events of what happened in Baby Teeth, but she also changed when he chose to send her away. And so she knows that thing that I had that was the most important thing is gone. And so yeah, that's an interesting change too. Is now she has to find a new that thing, I guess.
Right, right. I mean, she's a smart person. She can learn from her mistakes. And even if it's not an emotional development, she is learning, as you said before, like what works and what doesn't work, and can kind of build on that.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I really haven't deeply analyzed for myself, like, why does Hannah need to have this like obsession with somebody in her life? Like, why does she need that? But she does need that. Maybe I'll have to explore that in a future book with her.
Well, yeah. But I think that carrying that through in a new way in the new book is definitely the right way to continue telling her story. One thing that I thought about, so they at the end of Baby Teeth, Hannah gets taken to a place that handles problem children and stuff, and then in this book she's an adult, so we don't see any of the stuff that she went through, but it is referred to. And one of the thoughts I had in the times that she refers back to her treatment and the things that she learned at that school, the impression I got was that it was less trying to fix her and more trying to teach her how to like fit in. Did I read
I,
that properly?
well, my understanding of how, in the real world, young sociopaths are treated, I mean, you cannot teach someone to have empathy if they don't have it, but you can maybe teach them to understand the situation and how it's okay to act in that situation. So I was definitely thinking of that in terms of what her treatment would have been when she was a child, that she could learn to recognize when someone's upset and when she's the cause of that, or when someone is happy and what might have caused that. For her, it is definitely like building on her ability to be manipulative.
Yeah.
But it is also like, if you're not feeling emotions, for her, it is a study of people and what makes them react in certain ways and how she can kind of fit that into her own life and her own understanding of how people work, because people are very confusing to her in certain ways because they're different from how she is.
Yeah. And I thought that was an interesting thing to think about, was because she doesn't have there's not a cure for whatever is going on with Hanna. Teaching someone how to successfully navigate social situations from a certain perspective almost is like, how do you hack a person to do what you want them to, right? In a way, it kind of is that. Or like to a certain type of person, that's how they would interpret it. Like, oh, if I act this, if I don't do this, if I am this way, they'll do the thing I want. And like, it's almost like, how do you hack people? So that's a really tricky line to walk. How do you help a person um, successfully exist in society without accidentally training them how to be better manipulators?
Right, because of course the idea is, that once you learn this is what makes people sad, that you don't do that thing.
Yeah, right.
Or that this is what makes people angry, that you don't do that thing.
Yep.
But yeah, for someone who is just fundamentally going to be manipulative, it's like, oh, that's very informative if they can use that for something else in the future.
Yeah. Let's go back to the basics. The title is Dear Hanna. And anybody who hasn't read the book isn't aware why it's called Dear Hanna, but there is a series of correspondence between Hanna and her brother, whose nickname is Goose. So obviously there's plenty of spoilers that could go into talking about that. But I guess how early on in the process of creating the story were you aware that Goose was going to be a presence and and the whole writing a letter back and forth kind of thing?
Yeah, I knew that before I started writing the book. I had been thinking for a long time, even before I thought of doing Hanna as an adult, that if I ever returned to Hanna, I would give her a sibling, because I thought that dynamic with a sibling would be very, very interesting. So I always knew that whatever Hanna was going to do in the future, she was going to have a little brother. So yeah, I loved writing letters. I know I've always wanted to write an epistolary novel, which obviously this is not fully epistolary, but there are a lot of letters in it. And, that was really my chance to be able to write Hanna in first person, because I write in third person. So it was really fun to be able to write in her voice.
Why was it so obvious that Hanna needed to have a sibling? Like, what was the driving idea behind that?
Because there's so much potential for her to either be at her best or at her worst. Was she going to love a sibling, like almost obsessively, the way she had loved her dad? Would she view a sibling with like extreme jealousy? I mean, that can be very dangerous in families where one of the kids is a sociopath or a psychopath. That can present a very dangerous dynamic. So I always knew that, that would be an element that I would want to explore, to see like which side of the coin did she go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this might be too much of a spoiler, so we can cut it. But the one thing that I got from reading it was more of, oh, this is almost like Hanna needs an ally. Like, she needs someone on her side.
Well, I think that also just sort of goes to the fact that the coin that she ultimately is on, I don't think this is too spoilery, is that she loves her brother. I mean, that's
right.
That's her buddy. So
yeah.
I know it's so hard. There's so many things that it is hard to talk about for afraid of being spoilery.
I know. Yeah, that's why I'd love to do like an actual spoiler conversation, which for anybody listening, we might be doing after the normal episode. But yeah, it created the actual I think that you made a good point with the perspective too. Like it's a personal message from Hannah to ostensibly the person that she trusts the most, but the person that she feels like she can be kind of genuinely herself, and it gives us a look at a kind of a raw look at what Hannah really is, what she's going through, like when she's feeling something, what is the feeling and stuff. So
I think it makes her more sympathetic and more relatable also,
yeah.
to understand, like, this is a person who at any given time in her life does have like a really serious interest in someone that's like
Mm-hmm.
genuine. She genuinely, like, she needs somebody to understand her and to like her, and that makes her very relatable, I think.
Yeah, there really was the change I felt in my feelings about Hannah between Baby Teeth and reading Dear Hannah was like, and I want to protect her and make everything okay in Baby Teeth, at a safe distance. Versus now, it's like, yeah, it's much more personal. Like we really get to see why she's feeling or she's doing the things she is, why she's thinking the way she is, and stuff like that. So that was a really great, window into a troubled person, and it makes you question. Like it made me question, at least, um, how much of this is how much of bad things that happen are Hannah's fault versus like it just being like a square peg round hole thing. Like if she was in a society of sociopaths, would would it be different? I don't know. So yeah, it made me ask some questions about like how much fault can fall on what person.
I mean, I have a fundamental belief, and this is something I explore, I think, in pretty much all of my books, that there's, people aren't pure evil or pure good.
Mm-hmm.
People are a combination of both. And I think it's obvious that Hannah is a combination of both.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the things that she's doing, maybe they're coming from a selfish place, but she is in fact able to do things that are genuinely good, regardless of why she's doing them.
Mm-hmm.
And then sometimes it goes too far and she makes highly questionable decisions about what she's doing. But yeah, to me, that's what makes people really interesting, though, is that they are always these two elements. And
Yeah.
for some people like Hannah, those elements are at war with each other.
Yeah, absolutely. And then actually, so one of my questions that I had written down was, is Hannah a bad person? And an analogy I thought of to kind of contrast, like really just to kind of think about what we think of as a good or a bad person. I'm a big fan of the TV show Justified, based on Elmore Leonard's, story Fire in the Hole. And um, my girlfriend had started to, I think I didn't even push her to, I think she just kind of did. She'd heard me talking about it and like decided to check it out. And she started watching the first season. And maybe by the third episode, she's like, yeah, I've been watching that show you really like. That guy shouldn't be a cop. He kills way too many people. And it's a perspective I never had because he's so obviously billed as the good guy, the hero, but like her total impression of this guy was just he walks around killing people. And it's like, that's a really valid point. Like, this guy should be able, if he's the hero, to do good without bodies falling all the time. And so it made me question, like, how do we depict good and bad? And when do we mislabel people as good or bad? Because, yeah, like sometimes the
Yeah.
hero isn't that great of a person.
I mean, I don't want to get political because, we live in a time nobody wants to get political, but, I kind of feel like that same sort of thing is assigned to countries. It's like if
Yeah.
you live in a certain country, you have an idea which are the good countries and which are the evil countries, but there's such an arbitrary thing about it.
Yeah.
Because, of course, the evil countries, they aren't all evil. They're just ordinary people living there, having ordinary lives.
Yeah.
And the good countries aren't all good. Sometimes they kind of kill a lot of people. That's all I'll say.
I totally agree with you. And I think that there there's a good and a bad thing with like nuance. And I guess what I mean by that is it goes into my whole like kind of personal belief about like when we say like they're different than us, automatically their value has changed. The more we try and see how we're all similar, I feel like the better things will go. The more we try and say that's that type of person and they're different than us, like I feel like if we're doing that, we're going in the wrong direction.
Absolutely. No, that's been part of my whole philosophy, honestly, for decades. Decades and decades ago, I got very interested in Nazi Germany and wanting to know how the Holocaust could happen. And really, I mean, it really was what launched my interest in human behavior. And
Yeah.
it did not take long to reach the conclusion that the bottom line is there is no us and them. There is only us. There is
Yeah.
only us. There isn't like the monsters and the whatever. We are the monsters or we are the good guys. There's only us. That's it. And if more people could just think that way, it would really help a lot.
Yeah, I feel like we would be a lot less comfortable with killing each other if
Right.
we saw ourselves in everybody, kind of.
Right. I mean, why? To me, it's very strange that there's this idea of people from other countries or other cultures being somehow different from us.
Yeah.
It's like there may be superficial things that are different, but the heart of a human being and how we function and what we want to feel safe and why we like to laugh or why we like to love is so fundamentally the same. It's like, how can you look at another human being and think otherwise? But obviously, a lot of people do.
Yeah. I think that, yeah. But that's so true. And I feel like a lot of his mindset. So I'm not a well-traveled person, but, when I've traveled internationally or even when I've just met people traveling out here, when I meet people of other cultures, what I see in people are the similarities. Like, oh, this person grew up in a totally different world with a different language and different experiences and everything. But we both do that thing. And it's so fascinating to me when there are like kind of fundamental things that you can identify with people who are nothing like you. And I love that. I think that's like some of the best stuff is when you can see like, oh, we're the same.
Yeah.
We are the same. And I love that. That's one of the most encouraging things is finding those similarities, those commonalities, and celebrating them.
I mean, and I think it's part, like, to get back to what you had said almost from the beginning, it's part of why it can feel a little bit weird to say, oh, I like Hanna. Like,
Right.
Hannah's cool, because it's like you can see the things that are genuinely human about her in spite of her flaws.
Mm-hmm.
She definitely has.
Right. And I mean, and fundamentally, is Hanna doing anything other than just trying to figure life out?
Right. Isn't that what we're all doing?
Yeah.
Her way of doing it is not perfect, but are any of us doing it perfectly? I mean, okay, we're not hurting other people always, but at least not intentionally. But she would say she's not doing it intentionally. Okay, when she was 7, it was intentional. Okay, that was intentional.
Well, that's tricky. It's like, but like at its core, yeah, like I can even identify with Hanna because like I've been an asshole who's said awful things not realizing they were awful or whatever. Like, you're a teenager, you don't understand the world, and then you challenge things in a way, and then you realize, oh, that's why that's horrible. And then so yeah, I guess there's just that lack of empathy that makes things a little more challenging for her. So
right. And yet, she is applying a lot of intellect to trying to understand.
Yeah.
Like, she really is genuinely trying to understand.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's part of why sometimes she seems like people feel sad. Sometimes I feel sad for her because you see her trying so hard, and it's like the things she does is just like, oh, Hanna, no, that's not how you do it. But it's like there's this part of her that is that genuinely wants to do right and live a good life.
Mm-hmm.
But her sense of how to do that is just so twisted. It's just so not what you should do.
Yeah, it's tricky when you can be goal oriented but also not know when there are lines you're stepping over. So one of the other elements of the book is the fact that she got a job as a phlebotomist. I guess my question is, was that just an indulgence so that she could stab people with needles or be near blood, or was there like a different reason for that as being the occupation? Like, because it's a job that almost kind of demands empathy, right?
Mhm.
Like, because you're with people in a situation that they're very uncomfortable in, and so like the fact that she's got that specific job was an interesting choice.
Yeah, that was another element where before I started writing Dear Hannah and before I knew very much about her, the one thing I knew about her as an adult is she was going to be a phlebotomist. And initially it was, so that she could, when she needed to let off a little steam, that she could hurt people a little bit in a way that she could get away with, in a way that like wasn't completely destructive.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that as she went along in her training as being a phlebotomist and in her career, that she discovered, that she's something of a perfectionist and she wants to do a very good job. I don't know that there's really a lot of empathy from her perspective. I think it's more of like she wants to do a good job because like that's something she understands that she could maybe do it perfectly, except when she intentionally does not want to do it perfectly.
Right. Well, as someone who recently went through, so I had cancer, and I am healthy now. But anybody who knows anything about when you're going through chemo and stuff, it's just nonstop needle town. And so I went from being a person who my whole life was very needle averse and just thinking like, it was just an awful experience, to having gotten poked enough where I'm over that fear, and it's just like I could watch you just go to town on my arm, and it wouldn't bother me at all. Um, but I learned that there is so much skill that goes in. There's people who like you will not know that they found the vein. Like
Yes.
it can be literally painless. And there are other people who aren't as good. So um, you're absolutely right. There is a
Yeah.
perfection in that.
Yeah.
There's a skill and a talent that the better you are at it, like the more, like I'll be like I want her because I know that she's going to do it right.
Yeah.
My the in my doctor's office, sometimes my doctor's like, oh, I'm just going to do it, and if the woman who usually does it's there, I'm like, well, she's right there, and we can, because he's not that great. So yeah, there is
Yeah.
definitely a skill and a perfection to it. So yeah.
Yeah. I've had a lot of blood draws because I have health problems. It's not a secret. Um, and yeah, I've had a lot of blood draw injuries, which are really horrible. But
Yeah.
it's like this one blood lab, which is in the hospital where one of my doctors is. Those phlebotomists are so good. They
Yeah.
are so good. And it's like compared to other phlebotomists that I've gone to where I get injuries half the time, I'm like, yeah, people can do it completely painlessly. And,
Yeah.
and it makes you wonder, why can't the other people? Why haven't they learned to do that?
I know. You get the good ones, and you're like, "Do you want to just take more blood now? Can we just stack it up? Like,
Yeah,
this was a
just
great
say,
experience." But yeah, no, that's interesting. But it's interesting to hear that was kind of locked in from such an early stage of even pre-writing the book. That's cool. I do like the letting off steam aspect of that too. Like, just I gotta jab someone because I'm
right, right.
having a stressful day or whatever. That's cool.
And still from Hannah's perspective, it's like she's trying not to blow up her life.
Yeah.
So she thinks, oh, well, if I can just do a little bit, just cause a little bit of pain, and then I feel better and I haven't blown up my life.
Hmm.
She's learned a little bit from when she was 7, like to
Yeah.
try not to blow up her life.
Yep. Yeah. Um, yeah. It's cute in a way. So I don't have much else about Dear Hannah specifically that isn't spoilery. So I hopefully we'll do a little separate spoiler talk. Other than to say that the I can see it on your shelf behind you right now. The Dear Hannah that's got the multiple, is that just is that the not slipcover?
Yeah, that's
It's the hardcover
that's the hardcover without the jacket on
without
it.
the.
It looks
I
pretty
think
cool.
you said
Yeah.
it way better than I did, but
Yeah.
yeah, I like the whole like multiple deer Hannas and stuff like
Yeah, it
that.
looks very cool.
Yeah, I'm very excited to get my hands on um, the actual, because you were nice enough to send me an arc. It's right above me. But yeah, I love that. I love that look. I love the whole thing. I just want to kind of zoom out a little bit into still Hanna related, which is like you're wearing the Bad Hand Books T-shirt, and they are publishing your Underslumberbumblebeast book later this year. I was kind of grumpy because not grumpy, but it was a missed opportunity because I was under the impression it was coming out early 2025. So when I did my horror 2024 preview for July through December, I didn't include it, even though it is actually coming out in December now, right?
Right. It should
Yeah.
be out December 3rd.
Yeah.
It took a while to get a really solid date, but December 3rd, that is the date.
Yeah.
It's
And
happening.
for anybody who is new to the idea of Baby Teeth or Dear Hanna or the stories in general, it is an actual children's book that you wrote and is illustrated and everything, but it is referred to in both Baby Teeth and Dear Hanna as like a
It's
pivotal.
Yeah, it's Hannah's favorite book.
Yeah.
And it's been kind of influential to her. And I've long wanted it to be a real book, so I'm excited that it's finally going to be a real book.
How did that come about? Was that something that someone pitched to you, or were you looking around as a way to find a way to make it happen?
Yeah, no, I've wanted to make it happen, honestly, since before Baby Teeth was published, because there was a draft of it before Baby Teeth was published.
Oh,
And it's
cool.
like I had wanted, ideally, like the publishers of Baby Teeth could have published it, but they never knew about it. So I've had a hard time like getting traditional publishing to be on board with it because it's a little bit odd. Traditional publishing for children's books slots them into very narrow categories. So typically, a short chapter book is already weird. An illustrated short chapter book is extra weird. So it's like people are like, well, where are we going to shelve it? So that's why I went with Bad Hand Books, because as an independent press, he can do whatever he likes. Doug can pick whatever books he's into, and we can just do it the way the book should be done instead of trying to get it to conform to traditional publishing standards. So it should be a really fun book, and we're hoping that that adults who have read Dear Hanna and Baby Teeth, that they just might get a kick out of seeing it for real. And it is like a real book that kids 7 to 10 would enjoy. And it's probably a book that younger kids would enjoy having read to them because it's a very quirky little book. The illustrations are amazing. So yeah, it's gonna be awesome.
That was kind of cool too. There's funny. So personally, like when it first became pre-orderable, obviously I did the pre-order right away. And then anytime it's come up on social media, I'm like, did I pre-order? So I have to go like look to verify. Because I mean, it's a pretty common thing among like rabid pre-order people that they'll just pre-order multiple times absentmindedly. So I was like, no, I think I already did. But anyway, so first of all, everybody should pre-order Dear Hanna and that. But it was interesting to see the process of it being created from when Doug would post things online. So Doug from Bad Hand Books using, I think he's got one of his kids was like a reference for some of the drawings and stuff. Like she would be posed in a specific way, like peeking out from under the bed or whatever it is, so that the artist could have a concept of what to draw and stuff, I believe. So that was kind of a cool.
Yes, that's
cool
exactly what they did. Yeah, I think the character of Prue in the book is reminiscent of Doug's daughter, and maybe in part because Jesse was looking at photographs of her in different positions, like under the bed. So yeah,
that's cool. Yeah, definitely excited to have that kind of book family all together when that comes out too. Because I love those types of things. I love when like when something from a book becomes real in a way. And so like it's interesting to hear that that was kind of before even Baby Teeth was made, that it was an idea. Because originally in my mind, I was like, oh, there was the book made the book, and then the book became a book. But now it's like they kind of lived simultaneously.
Yeah, I mean, some of my inspiration for that, I'm sure you've seen the Babadook, and then the Babadook had a book, which
Yeah.
was super cool, and it was like a collector's item, and I knew somebody who had one, and it was like amazing. So,
Yeah.
like, I always wanted my Underslumberbumblebeast to be a real book like that, so that it
Mhm.
tied in. So, yeah.
Well, and then the other thing that I always think about is the little, and I'm going to forget the name, but the little felt, um, her little
Her
toy.
little skog,
Yeah.
her little toy. Yeah.
I would absolutely buy one of those and have it on a shelf if that was something that was.
Oh yeah, I made one. He's sitting over there staring at me. I know I should have brought him over.
Well, I guess that's a thing that fans could do is just make their own, right? Because
Yeah.
that's kind of,
I mean,
yeah.
we have a dream, Doug and I and the artist, of like, could we ever have merchandising from my Underslumberbumblebeast? Because it would be really fun to have
Yeah.
these quirky little characters as like things that people could buy, or to have them on T-shirts or whatever. So we're
Mhm.
hoping maybe someday there'll be merchandising.
Well, I like what he's doing with Bad Hand Books. I think that um, it's encouraging to see how much energy he puts into his projects, and how much I guess attention and support he's able to kind of rally around things, so that
Yeah,
I always have a good
yeah,
impression of his work.
yeah. He's very passionate about what he does, which is
Yeah.
great.
I like seeing that. I like Bad Hand is doing great stuff. I've had a lot of people who've published through Shortwave rave about Shortwave publishing, so it's nice to see that. It's almost like because it's not like your indie where it's like an. I've been doing this for a long time, and I've seen like it's an author who also runs a press, and then keeps going with it as long as they can, and then eventually they have to put it down because they want to focus on their writing. Like these almost seem like boutique specialty kind of situations where they start with a vision and they treat it very professionally and really do the projects justice. So I'm happy that I'm starting to recognize there's more and more of that happening. It seems like,
Yeah, for sure.
yeah, because they open up doors that traditional publishing isn't opening,
Right,
and there's absolutely a lot of space for that kind of thing right now.
right. I mean, and Doug has even said that in certain ways, Bad Hand Books has become a home for the books of established authors who can't publish their books with traditional publishing.
Hmm?
So, it's nice to have that alternative, because most of us who create stuff, we don't want to do just one thing. It's like we want to have like creative outlets to do all sorts of things. And it's like commercial fiction is awesome. It's great. It pays the bills, but it's fun to be able to branch out and to do other work that's maybe creative in different ways.
Yeah, and there's definitely different approaches for that. Like for a long time, Josh Mallerman would do a book with his top five person, and then he would do an independent book, and then his traditional. I'll call it traditional, not top five. Traditional pub, independent, traditional, independent. He would kind of alternate. Um, Bad Hand has Laird Barron's books,
Mhm.
so like yeah, there's definitely, or like even I would say the Girl Who Outgrew the World is something that would have been a lot harder to get a traditional publisher
Right.
to
Yeah.
want to engage with, but that's, if you ask me, your fucking best work.
Oh,
And like just thinking about that book makes me so emotional. And so the thought that like there is a place that saw the value of it and wanted to believe in it and put it out there is encouraging, and I love that kind of stuff. So yeah, I love that you can
thank
have
you.
kind of a mixed approach to like
Yeah.
how you publish your works and what works belong in what places. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that was another project where it's like we could not sell it to a big five publisher, but I really wanted it to exist. It was really important to me that it exist in the world. So thank you so much for saying that.
Well, and then I was rearranging my books or something recently, and I opened it up, um, and I was looking at your. Is this in? I know this is a total side note now, but or maybe you wrote. Maybe it's the description you made or something. There was a note somewhere about how this book came about because I'm going to hold it up for people who are watching. Everybody needs to go get this right now and read it because it is fucking incredible. It was during the Kavanaugh hearings, right?
Yes.
That
yes.
you were like, just like you got a fire got lit and you had to write this story. So
yeah, I don't know if that comment made it maybe I don't know if it made it into the book or even on the back, but it was definitely something I talked about publicly.
Yeah.
Because the book, it's a dark fairy tale, just to let people know. It's a novella, so it's quite different from my other work, but it very much and very intentionally functions as a parable for how a patriarchy treats the female body. And it definitely was inspired in part. Like literally, I started writing it while I was watching the Kavanaugh hearings. So yeah, that happened.
Yeah. And yeah, maybe, you know what, because you sent me an arc and I just don't know because I just rearranged everything. So now everything's not where I expect it to be. Maybe you actually wrote that in there. I think maybe it was actually handwritten in the arc that you sent me.
Yeah, that's possible.
Yeah. So, but now that we're talking about that, and not to get into politics or anything, but was it you? I'm second guessing myself. The whole Childless Cat Ladies meme. Didn't you post
I did post one of those. Yes, I did.
So, but that, I loved that because, first of all, fucking a week ago, if our conversation happened, we'd probably be in very different moods and very different, like, whatever. I'm feeling a little bit more buoyed lately. A lot more buoyed lately.
Me too.
But idiot JD Vance, anybody who listens to my podcast is not going to get offended by me calling JD Vance an idiot.
Okay,
I don't think.
Good.
I hope. And if they do, you don't have to listen. Said something about Childless Cat Ladies in a very negative way. And something about what's going on right now, I think is fantastic, is that instead of that then being a stigma where, everybody's, because a lot of things, a lot of times what will happen is like the bad voice will say the thing and then the counter argument is argued in a way where it validates the thing that person's saying. And that's not happening right now. Like the Childless Cat Lady thing, everybody's like, fuck yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of us who are like so proud to be Childless Cat Ladies. Like, I'm so into it. I love being a Childless Cat Lady. That is not an insult.
No, and it's like, finally, like, it's like, yes, you just identified this massive group of people who support not you, buddy.
Right.
And guess what? That's a good thing for us. Like, now you've just made us more proud of a thing that never would have been a topic of conversation unless you said this thing. And you just shot yourself in the foot. And I love that. I love it.
Me too. I hope he keeps doing it.
So, well, I just hope that in a few months, just the volume gets turned down on a whole lot of stuff because it doesn't matter anymore. But anyway. So,
I agree. Yes.
Anyway, yeah, that was a little bit of a peek into politics, but it was because the cat lady meme just like made my day at one point, and I couldn't not bring it up. So, one thing we didn't talk about that I have written as a question. I don't know if this is a thing that is gonna produce anything, especially since you're kind of just gearing up talking about Dear Hannah. But is there anything specific you would hope that people walk away from Dear Hannah thinking? I know sometimes like people write stuff and they're like, oh, it would be cool if my ideas on this were something that they were thinking about after they read this. And sometimes it's like, I just want them to enjoy a story. And I think both are 100% valid. But I walked away from Dear Hannah having some real thoughts about how we approach people who are different than us. And so, yeah, I didn't know if you had any kind of like hopes for anything like that or not.
Yeah, I mean, in a certain way, I hope for all of my books, because I do write characters that are such shades of gray, that I always hope that people maybe connect with the idea of a person in a way that they wouldn't have before. It's like I do try to make people who, or characters who people might think are unsympathetic, as sympathetic, because, it's just part of recognizing the humanity in each of us. And obviously, one of the other things I hope is that for all of the people who did love Baby Teeth, I know all of them are not going to love Dear Hannah, but I think a number of them will. And obviously, I want them to be pleasantly surprised. I know it's maybe a different book than what they thought if they just wanted more, child antics, but I definitely hope that they are pleasantly surprised by seeing a different view of her.
Yeah. I would say that I am that group. Yeah, definitely. One kind of way that I was trying to think of because we talked a lot about how the book made me feel about Hannah and how it was different maybe than Baby Teeth. And I thought of kind of an analogy that is a little extreme, but it kind of illustrates the point. And it is like I kind of am Will Graham to Hannibal when it comes to how I feel about Hannah. Like, does that make sense? Like, I know that's an extreme example, but like, I got that. Like, we've spent a lot of time getting to know her, and you understand the way she works and why she does the things that she does, and like that has endeared her to us. And so, like, I can't help but care about her, and so I kind of feel like that's how you love a sociopath. Maybe is like just understanding them very well.
I think so. Or maybe just being deeply curious about what they do and how they function, because it is
Yeah,
fascinating.
yeah, yeah, definitely, for sure. Well, I want to thank you for putting more Hannah out in the world for all of us to enjoy, and as always, for joining me to entertain my thoughts and questions about the stuff that you write. It's always so fascinating, and I've been like totally ride or die for your whole career since Baby
Thank
Teeth.
you.
So thank you so much for continuing to give us reasons to get together and chat.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate how supportive you've been of my career since the beginning. It means the world to me. So thank you so much.